Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian at the Reagan Library in Simi Valley, California, where we're covering the 2016 Reagan National Defense Forum. Our coverage here is sponsored by Raytheon, and we're honored to have with us the Right Honorable Michael Fallon, who is the Defense Secretary of the United Kingdom. Sir, thanks very much for joining us.
A pleasure.
I wanted to start off, you've come a very, very long way all the way out here to the Reagan Forum. We're here in the private quarters of Ronald Reagan and his wife Nancy Reagan. Why was it so important for you to travel all this way for this conference?
Well, I was invited to come and speak to the conference here today. The first time, I think, that international visitors had been invited to participate, and I think that's extremely important, because we are at a sea change, obviously, in the change of administration here in the United States. But the organisers of the forum also wanted an external view of that from the allies. And there is no closer ally to the United States than the United Kingdom.
You are our closest ally, and there have been concerns, in part because some of the statements that the President-elect made when he was on the campaign trail, questions about NATO, its validity, and there are some who are still concerned, as we heard from Lindsey Graham today, that there could be policies that could undermine the alliance. For example, in the United States partnering more closely with Russia to fight ISIS, that there could be some easing back, for example, from NATO or from some other commitments the United States has. From your perspective as the Defense Secretary of America's closest ally, what are the potential implications for NATO, Europe, and the United Kingdom if the United States starts to ease away or back away from the NATO alliance?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to aim off any campaign rhetoric, what was said by either of the candidates in the campaign, or indeed in any campaign. What matters is what the new administration does. And every successive United States administration has accepted its leadership role within NATO and has, in recent years, stepped up to its role in the battle against extremism that we've seen and we're dealing with in the Middle East. So we're not expecting the new administration to be any different to the past. Now, with regard to your two particular questions, so far as NATO is concerned, the criticism that European members of NATO should be paying more for their own defense is not new. We've heard it from successive American presidents, probably throughout my political lifetime. And on that, President-elect Trump is right. European members should be paying more of the bill. We agree with that. We're meeting our 2%. The target set by NATO. Very few other members of the NATO alliance have yet to meet the 2%. So we're with the President on that, and we're also with him on NATO continuing to reform, becoming a more responsive military alliance than it has been for many years in the past.
And there's no concern with the suggested conditionality that there was during the campaign, for example, in terms of how much you spend and how much support you might get.
Well, NATO isn't formed on that basis. NATO is a collective defensive alliance, and indeed, I think many people in America will remember how Article 5 was last triggered in aid of collective defense. It was last triggered after 9/11 to come to the defense of the United States of America. So this is a collective organization where we stand by each other.
And do you think that there's going to be an increase in defense spending? Obviously, the UK does punch at the 2%, including punching above the weight in terms of the investment portfolio. But do you think that there's going to be an increase in NATO defense spending among members, in part because of this push from this new administration?
Well, there is already a sea change since the Wales summit 2 years ago, reinforced by the Warsaw summit this year. We're now seeing more than half of members of the alliance beginning to move their expenditure up or planning to meet the 2% target, albeit some years out, because some of them are starting from a low base. Now, there are others who are nowhere near 1% at the moment and still have some work to do. But I think the criticism of the new president-elect could be very useful in reminding Europe of its obligations. The pressure, the threat is to NATO inside Europe. It's the European continent that's under pressure, and European countries should be doing more.
The administration has made itself clear that it wants to partner with Russia to better fight ISIS, even though so far Russia has shown no inclination of really fighting ISIS. From your standpoint, as a key member of the alliance that's fighting ISIS, what are some of the conditions or the things you would like to see in place before you see any deal with Russia bringing them into that fight in a formalized collaborative way?
Well, the relationship between the United States and Russia is obviously a key one between two very important powers, and it's no surprise that a new president should want to look at that relationship again, and he would be perfectly entitled to start to reset it. We agree it's necessary to talk to Russia about certain things, to de-escalate tension, to avoid any potential conflict, for example, in aviation, and to help bring Russia into the argument in areas where it has great influence, for example, over Iran or over Syria. And that's important. We want to see Russia using its influence over Syria for the good and getting this civil war stopped, so enabling us, therefore, to get after ISIL in northeast Syria.
Even if that takes place at the expense of easing of sanctions, I mean, what would be some of the concerns, or what would be some of the things that the UK would not like to see in terms of the connection, for example, between Ukraine or Syria, for example?
Well, the sanctions were applied after the annexation of Crimea and the interference in eastern Ukraine, and those sanctions should stay in place, clearly, until the Minsk agreements are fully complied with, and that's what we set out at the time. It's what the United States agreed with. It's what the European Union has imposed, and we expect and hope those sanctions will stay in place until we get Minsk fully implemented.
You were at the Halifax summit. You spoke very passionately about Russia, but you also about Britain's role in the world. Britain has been a global power for centuries. Why are you taking this opportunity to underscore this now? Is it because it's linked to the Brexit vote to sort of ally sort of global concerns? What's one of the reasons you're taking this message around the world?
Well, it is partly to offset any false perception of the Brexit vote, which is simply about leaving the European Union, the legal entity that is the Union. And it is not about stepping away either from Europe itself, our obligations to defend what is our continent, or about stepping away from our role in the world. In fact, since the Brexit vote, you've seen Britain stepping up. We've been putting more troops into Iraq to help train Iraqi forces. We are stepping up with more troops in Afghanistan, helping to sustain the effort there against the Taliban. We're putting more peacekeepers into Africa, and we're continuing our training of Ukrainian forces, for example. So these are ways in which we are demonstrating now that although we leave the European Union, we continue to protect our interests around the world, and we continue to step up to our global obligations.
You recently, the UK joined the United States and Japan in a tripartite naval agreement in the Pacific. Is that something of a sign that Britain intends to become again a Pacific power?
Well, we have interests in Asia Pacific. We have a garrison down in Brunei, but we also have strong commercial interests in what is one of the great growth regions of the world, from which trade with the United Kingdom depends. And we have an interest in that region. We have key allies in that region, notably the United States, which is a Pacific country, Japan, Australia, we have strong relationships with. And we have as much interest in the stability of that region as anybody else. Now, we pursue that through our Five Powers arrangement with Australia and New Zealand and Singapore and Malaysia, and we also pursue it through our bilateral relationships with Japan and with South Korea, and we want to play our part in ensuring stability for that region.
I want to take you to the investment portfolio. UK has been working to develop the highest end of military capability and acquire it, and in relatively rapid span. Over at Farnborough was the announcement for the P-8 aircraft, for example, the 9 P-8 maritime patrol aircraft. But after the Brexit decision, the pound keeps descending. It's at $1.27. It's $1.27 now. And there are friends of mine in London who tell me that from a hedging standpoint, we're already getting to a point where it gets pretty dicey and it starts to create a hole. At some point, when does the hedging run out, and when will you have to make some tough decisions within the investment portfolio? Again, because it has so much high-end kit in it that it's very, very expensive. How much elasticity do you have?
Well, it's perfectly true. A lot of the equipment we're buying now is purchased in dollars because of a lot of it is being spent over here in the United States. But it's too early, I think, to be sure exactly where sterling is going to settle down. It's risen in value against the euro in recent days, and I don't think we can yet say exactly with confidence where it's going to settle. And it's not a matter that ministers actually would like to forecast at any point. Now, like any other large organisation, as you've mentioned, of course, we take precautions against fluctuations in the currency, and those precautions will serve us in good stead.
From a Brexit standpoint, how is the UK going to manage its relationship with Europe? Is it going to be something that goes through the Council at some point on a military level? Is it through NATO? How is the military cooperation going to continue with Europe, absent going through EU channels, for example, from a collaborative basis?
Well, of all the departments in Britain, defence is probably the least affected by Brexit, because most of our defence and security depends on our membership of NATO. Now, there is some cooperation on terrorism, for example, that runs with other European countries, data sharing, cooperation between police forces and the counter-terrorism services. But that can be done on a bilateral basis or on a multilateral basis, on even a broader basis than the European Union itself, because other countries like Norway and so on participate in these arrangements. So I don't have any concern that our defence or security is going to be placed in difficulty by our leaving Brexit, and we will continue to maintain our obligations in Europe. We're deploying a battalion to Estonia, we're putting extra troops into Poland, we're sending the RAF Typhoons down next year to help stabilise the Black Sea region. They'll be based in Romania, and we're putting additional troops back into Kosovo to preserve the stability in the Western Balkans.
You mentioned fast jets. You've spoken repeatedly about the need for the UK to maintain a larger fast jet force. Obviously, you were going to neck down to a force that was going to be Eurofighters and F-35s. Are you going to keep the Tornadoes around longer through a service life extension program or anything, a little bit like some of your allies are doing? Germany, for example, is going to keep the airplane in service as well?
Well, we've got great service out of the Tornado over the last few years, and the Tornado is still proving itself, every day, every night, in the skies over Iraq and over Syria. But we have the Typhoon now coming on stream with more weapons being integrated onto it, and the Typhoon and then the F-35 will be our major airstrike in future.
But no decision yet, as some would like to see, of a slightly larger F-35 force to satisfy both RAF and Royal Navy demands. Do you think you'll go above the 138 number that's the plan?
Well, 138 is quite a number of jets.
Well said. Let me take you to submarines. I mean, one of the concerns about Russia, and one of the reasons why you made that emergency P-8 or rapid P-8 decision, was a little bit of the increase in Russian submarine capabilities. Obviously, that's something that you're doing in partnership with Norway. Ina Eriksson, Sarida, and I discussed that. From the standpoint of undersea capabilities, does Britain need a larger attack submarine force as well, and a larger maritime patrol force in order to police the waters in its neighborhood?
Well, first of all, we're restoring the maritime capability because it's a gap that we had after 2010 when the plane we were relying on wasn't put into service and we had to cancel the program. But we're also restoring it because, as you've said, there's been an increase in Russian submarine activity. But thirdly, of course, we do need to protect the new carriers, and we do need to protect the nuclear deterrent. And the maritime patrol aircraft we're ordering, 9 of them, together with Norway's 5, I think will constitute a very effective patrol capability in the North Atlantic. Now, so far as the other submarines are concerned, we have an Astute-class build program. 3 of those submarines are now out on the water. 4th is due to be launched in the spring, and we're hoping to sign contracts on boats 6 and 7. 5 is already signed. We're hoping to sign contracts on boats 6 and 7 shortly.
Any interest in an 8th one?
No, the program is for 7.
I want to ask one last question. What are some of the messages that you're delivering to the new Trump team insofar as what you would like to see from the United States in this new administration and its global outlook, especially with regard to Russia, on which you've spoken very passionately?
Well, we hope the new administration will continue the coalition against ISIL. That's essential. It's terrorism that affects us all. affected California, where we are today, affected California exactly a year ago. We've seen it in Western Europe. This is an evil that has to be confronted. The United States is leading the coalition, and I hope under the new administration will continue to do so. United States, every administration has played a key part in NATO, leading the NATO alliance, and I hope that will continue. And we also expect and hope the United States will continue to lead us across the world, defending democracies, standing up for the values that we particularly share with the United States.
Sir, thanks so much for taking so much time with us.
Thank you.